Okay, hello everyone. I'm Giacomo DeStefano, the director, and I want to thank you for joining us today for our latest presentation on an interesting bit of Patterson history in Pearl Mania and the Patterson Gem Rush of 1857. One of our sponsors for this, besides the Patterson Museum, is the Patterson Museum Foundation, who generously loans us their Zoom platform so we can reach you, as well as record this session and later add it to our YouTube channel, where you'll find various bits of Patterson's history already online. One little bit of housekeeping, as I'll say, if you have any questions as they come up during the presentation, I ask that you put them in the chat box, and then we'll read them at the end, and Heather will be glad to provide you with the answers. I'm preparing right now myself for a talk on Wright Aeronautical Corporation and its history, which it was here for the golden age of aviation. And I only mention this because only yesterday, while researching newspapers.com, and there's a plug for them because they've been a wealth of information for us, running through articles that we would never have access to sometimes. But on October 26th, 1934, at the Wright Aeronautical Company, a gentleman by the name of Jack Terwilliger was having lunch. He spent 20 cents, or about $4.75 today, on oysters on a half shell. That was his lunch at the cafeteria. Pretty spiffy, I think, for Wrights. However, as he bit down, he found a pearl. The pearl itself was valued at the time about $175, or $4,100. Nice return on his little lunch. Now that our lunch is over, we'll talk about another meal that didn't do so well, and actually will issue in the the Gem Rush. Presenting today, of course, is our wonderful curator. I cannot say enough about this woman since she's been here since 2019. Heather Garside has really changed our entire operation and really increased the value of all our exhibitions, as well as these presentations that you're about to see. So I won't keep embellishing you. You could do it on your own now, Heather. Take it away.
Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for joining. Just give me a second to share my screen here. All right. So, hello everyone. Thank you all for tuning in for today's program. Thank you, Jack, for such a great introduction. I'm going to talk to you about a really very interesting piece of Patterson's history, the Patterson Pearl Rush, called by pearl expert and author George Kuntz, quote, the first awakening to a realization of the value of freshwater pearls in America. This event has also been attributed as the first gem rush in American history. This gem rush put Patterson in the forefront of national and international awareness in a way that was very different from the city's many industrial achievements. I am sure you already have lots of questions because, as one New York Times reporter put it in 1857, quote, Jersey pearls, let the truth be stated, are very fishy. So before I jump right into talking about the Patterson Pearl Rush, I just wanted to take a minute to talk about pearls more generally, so that we all kind of understand how pearls work and their importance in culture. Pearls are found all over the world. Since ancient times, they've been prized possessions in many cultures. The oldest known pearl in the world is the Abu Dhabi pearl, which dates back 8,000 years to the Neolithic period. Cultures all over the world, including the Romans, the Egyptians, the Chinese, the Greeks, the Europeans, the Indians, have venerated and valued pearls. Very famously, Cleopatra supposedly dissolved a pearl in vinegar and drank it in front of Mark Antony to demonstrate her wealth and power. And this is an 18th century depiction of that event. Pearls were also one of the precious stones explorers sought when they came to the New World, and traders exchanged glass beads for pearls among many indigenous peoples. When we look at a pearl, we are often focused on its beauty. And for anyone who's ever seen a pearl, it does not come as a surprise that pearls have long been considered a precious jewel. However, to the mollusk who forms it, a pearl has a very different meaning. When a mollusk opens by separating its shells, it is vulnerable to particles or parasites slipping inside. These foreign bodies can potentially harm the mollusk, being inside the shell with its internal organs. These irritants disrupt the mantle or the soft tissue near the shell, and here you can see how the mantle attaches to the shell. As a defense mechanism, the mollusk oozes a liquid that contains a carbonate mineral aragonite and the protein conchyolin. First, the mollusk surrounds this intruder in tissue, which is called the pearl sac. And you can think of the pearl sac almost like a cocoon. Once secured in the sac, the tissue secretes nacre. Here is a close-up view of nacre. Nacre is what we call mother of pearl, and it continues to form layers over time to form the pearl. The nacre is actually the strongest and lightest biomaterial known to man, and it's stronger than concrete. This visual brings us back to what this process looks like to the naked eye. Here we see the pearl sac, inside of which the nacre is coating the irritant. And while we think of pearls as perfect spheres, this process occurs for irritants of all shapes. And as a result, not all pearls are round. Some pearls form completely detached inside the soft mantle tissues, while others attach to the outer shell, forming what are called blister pearls. That is what we're looking at here, a blister pearl from the collection of the Natural History Museum in London. And this mollusk, which I just thought was so cool and I needed to share, which is also found in the Natural History Museum in London, shows a small fish being coated with nacre. Today, many pearls are created commercially, a process known as pearl farming. The irritant is manually inserted into the mollusk to begin the process. On average, pearls develop in about 6 months. Larger pearls can take years to form. The average pearl is about 3 carats, and it's possible to harvest pearls without killing the mollusk. Some oysters produce 2 to 3 pearls in a lifetime. Other mollusks, including some freshwater varieties, can produce far more, and sometimes they can even produce more than 1 at a time. Any mollusk that produces a shell can form a pearl, and that includes both fresh and saltwater varieties. This includes abalone, marine snails, conch, clam, mussels, and oysters, among many others. The older the mollusk, the more likely it is to contain a pearl. Today, naturally occurring pearls in wild oysters are 1 in 10,000. The size, shape, and color of pearls are variable. Naturally occurring pearls are usually white, cream, or gray. Excuse me. However, the color usually reflects the color of the shell interior of the mollusk forming the pearl, and therefore conch shells, for example, are usually pink. As I said, pearls occur in both salt and freshwater mollusks. Fundamentally, there is no great difference between the two. Some say that freshwater pearls may lack the luster of saltwater pearls. There are more variations of color in saltwater pearls. Freshwater pearls usually occur in white, off-white, and cream, while blue, green, black, and pink can also occur more often in saltwater pearls. Fewer shapes occur in freshwater pearls. They're mostly either round or oval, whereas saltwater pearls sometimes can be formed in tear shapes or what is called baroque. However, as I mentioned earlier, one of the big differences is that freshwater pearls have been known to produce multiple pearls at one time, and the most being recorded at 30 pearls all at once. So now that we all understand a bit more about pearls and their formation, let's go back to Patterson in the 1850s and talk about the Patterson Pearl Rush. One of the main characters who I don't think gets enough credit for its part in this piece of Patterson history is this guy, the river mollusk. And it's this variety of mollusk that the Patterson pearls were found. The Patterson Pearl Rush, sometimes called the Pearl Craze or the Pearl Mania, all started in the middle of February in 1857. Therefore, to provide some historical context, it was following the California Gold Rush by less than a decade. Things began in a very ordinary way. A Patterson shoemaker named David Howell went fishing for mussels in the Notch Brook. Howell lived at 289 Mill Street, which we can see here. And according to Frank Leslie's newspaper, which is where these images have come from, he lived in a modest frame building on the outskirts of Patterson. With his, and this is Leslie's description, his buxom and comely wife, their child, and a maid. They all lived together. After cooking his mess of mussels, he discovered a very large round pearl inside one of the shells. This pearl which was 400 grains in size, which is just under 130 carats, was ruined during the cooking process. Had it not been cooked, Kuntz estimated its value at $25,000 or $900,000 today. A satirical New York Times article on July 2nd, 1857, expressed some doubt about this story, particularly the value of the cooked pearl, stating, quote, "Why did that stupid shoemaker cook a $25,000 pearl for breakfast and reduce its value to $25? Were these stories true, or had they a fishy flavor?" End quote. But whether the reporter believed it or not, Howell's neighbors did. David Howell and many of his neighbors returned to the brook where he had been fishing that day. And now these pearls, instead of being diving for pearls as you do in the ocean, Frank Leslie indicates that those people seeking these pearls were waders, puddlers, or diggers in the mud. And that's because the water was only about 1 to 2 feet deep, and was up to the knees of most people. So those searching in this half gravelly, half muddy bottom of the brook were basically groping around in the mud with their bare hands. Where exactly was all of this happening? Where is Notch Brook? This event is referred to in all publications as the Patterson Pearl Rush, and the resulting pearls are often called Patterson pearls. But in fact, full disclosure, the Pearl Rush did not actually happen within the borders of the city of Patterson. The Patterson pearls were actually found south of Patterson in the township of Aquaconock, in the section that is modern-day Clifton. And if we take a closer look at the top left corner of this 1877 map, we can get closer to the origin of the pearls. The Patterson pearls were found in a small stream called the Notch Brook. There is some confusion about the exact location of the Notch Brook even today. The contemporary sources do offer a few clues. In one newspaper, it is referred to as a narrow but inviting stretch of water. Based on everything I've read, it seems likely that the brook was this body of water, which we see running through the land of H. Hamilton, and then it crosses Valley Road. One clue that seems to confirm this location is that H. Hamilton's neighbor on that map is H.F. Paget, and many of the contemporary accounts mention that the pearls were found in the vicinity of Paget's Hotel or Paget's Tavern. Here, Frank Leslie's illustrated newspaper has provided a view of that hotel. Finding the Pearl Brook in the modern map has its own challenges, and that's because Route 46 and Route 3 have changed the landscape of this area quite a bit. Some of the smaller streams and tributaries now run through underground pipes or have disappeared altogether. It's believed that Notch Brook flows through this area in a pipe under Route 46 and emerges in Montclair Heights, Clifton. Some sources claim that the Notch Brook is in fact the river known today as the Third River, a stream that flows east and south. And that stream begins in Rifle Camp Park in today's Woodland Park and flows through several towns and across Essex County through a wildlife preserve in Montclair and continues on to Bloomfield. However, other sources seem to indicate that the Notch Brook is actually just a tributary of the Third River, or perhaps a section of the Third River that was known by a different name in the 1850s. Regardless of which it is, once the craze began, I believe the individuals searching for pearls were in fact searching all along the Third River. For a long time after 1857, the Third River was known as the Pearl River. A few days after David Howell cooked the first pearl, one of his neighbors, a carpenter named Jacob Quackenbush, found another large pearl. Jacob was a carpenter by trade, and he lived at 180 Marshall Street. According to several accounts, Quackenbush's father claimed that pearls had been found in the same area 40 years earlier, around 1817, when he was a boy, but no one had taken much notice. The boys had collected them as novelties, but it hadn't really attracted much attention. His son, Jacob, found a very large pink pearl. Pink pearls are valued higher than other colors due to their rarity. It was reported at the time as being a perfect sphere at 93 grains or a little over 23 carats, which would go on to become internationally famous. This image of that pearl is from George Kuntz's book Gems and Precious Stones of North America. Charles L. Tiffany, hearing about the large freshwater pearl, purchased it from Quackenbush for $1,500. According to contemporary reports, Tiffany was really excited about the local source of pearls so near his operations in New York. However, his New York customers were not interested in New Jersey pearls. Eventually, the Patterson pearl was sent to France for sale in the Paris branch of Tiffany's in 1858. In Paris, the pearl was sold to a dealer. The dealer seems to have had a buyer in mind when he made the purchase. Empress Eugenie, the wife of Napoleon III, was well known for her love of pearls. A Spanish princess, Eugenie was born in Granada, Spain on May 5, 1826. She married Emperor Napoleon III in 1853. This painting of her was painted the year of their marriage when she was 27. She served as his empress until 1870. The pearl was purchased by Napoleon III for his wife from the dealer between 1858 and 1860. Because of its association with Eugenie, the pearls were afterwards commonly known as this pearl was afterwards commonly known as either the Queen Pearl, the Tiffany Queen Pearl, or the American Queen Pearl. Some credit the Empress's ownership of this pearl, excuse me, with sparking a pink pearl trend in the 1860s and 1870s. Here we see the Empress later in life. This photo was taken in 1862, and notice the pearls around her neck. The Empress did not have a carefree life, unfortunately. Empress Eugenie served as head of the state for a brief period between July 28th and September 8th, 1870, during which time her husband and her son were away with the army engaged in the Franco-Prussian War. Napoleon III was defeated in the Franco-Prussian War, and the emperor was captured at the Battle of Sedan. This defeat was the last straw for the people of France, who had not supported the war and were not really big fans of the emperor. Sensing the growing unrest in Paris, Eugenie decided to flee France. She did this by turning to a very unlikely ally, her dentist. Dr. Thomas Evans, an American living in Paris, was the royal dentist. Unable to escape on her own, Empress Eugenie and her friend, Madame Le Breton, went to Dr. Evans' home and asked him for help. They created a plan, and the next day, wearing disguises, the women were snuck out of the city by the dentist, posing as two sick patients being returned home. To show her gratitude to Dr. Evans, the Empress gifted the Queen Pearl and other jewels to him. Eugenie lived another 40 years, dying in 1920 at the age of 94. The French crown jewels were sold in New York in 1930, and with this sale, we see a resurgence in interest, at least in the newspapers, in the Patterson pearls and the Patterson Pearl Rush. Dr. Thomas Evans is an interesting guy in his own right. Born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, he apprenticed with a gold and silversmith who made dental tools. He became interested in dentistry and trained as a dentist. In his early career, he received a lot of recognition for his pioneering work in using gold for fillings. In 1847, at 24 years old, he moved to Paris at the invitation of a colleague. His move was a successful one, and he became the dentist of many royal houses of Europe. While in Europe, he introduced to Europe the use of nitrous oxide as a general anesthetic. Among his royal clients were the Emperor and Empress of France. He'd actually known Empress Eugenie before her marriage when she lived in Spain. And based on his close relationship with royals all over Europe, Dr. Evans made many shrewd investments in real estate and accumulated a fortune of $35 million. Due to his relationship with the crown heads of Europe, he also received over 200 honors and decorations. He had no children, and his wife predeceased him. He had given generously to charity and educational institutions during his lifetime, and when he died in 1897, he left most of his money and his pearl collection to the University of Pennsylvania Dental School, and the school named a building in his honor. Parts of the Evans collection were acquired by the Cooper Hewitt Museum in New York, and the exact location of the Queen Pearl within the collection was lost for some time. It was rediscovered, or believed to be rediscovered, in a snake-topped stick pin. The weight and color of the pearl seem to match the Queen Pearl's description, but as you will notice from this picture, it's not a perfect sphere as indicated in earlier reports. Rather, this is what would be called the Baroque shape, which leaves some room for doubt that this is in fact the Queen Pearl. But it's important to note that George Kunz, the pearl authority who claimed that the pearl was perfectly spherical, had never actually seen the queen pearl. The perfect sphere pearls are also very rare in freshwater mussels, so it seems likely this could be the right pearl after all. In October of 2001, the American Museum of Natural History was the first to host a traveling exhibition, Pearls, a Natural History, which included this pearl as the queen pearl. After its debut in New York, this pearl, with the rest of the exhibition, traveled around the US, Canada, France, Australia, Japan, and the United Arab Emirates. While the largest, the queen pearl is not the only pearl discovered in the Notch Brook. Following Quackenbush's sale of his pink pearl to Tiffany, the news spread. And that is when the real rush on Notch Brook began. The Patterson, New Jersey Guardian published on April 6, 1857, quote, quite an excitement as for the past fortnight existed in the upper part of the city owing to a sort of pearl mania, end quote. Many locals, including farmers, urban workers, and at least one school teacher participated in the rush, as well as people who came from Newark, Jersey City, and New York City to try their luck. An eyewitness, paraphrased by Kuntz, described the, quote, scene as one of great animation, the crowds of people and the horses and wagons along the shore, end quote. Some accounts estimate that about 300 people descended upon the river. Another account claimed that about 10,000 people had tried their luck over the course of several months, but that most of them had given up in at least 2 or 3 days. Many more pearls were found, none as large or valuable as the queen pearl. I'm going to read you this clipping from the Daily National Enquirer, our Intelligencer, and Washington Express. The following pearls, as being in the hands of Jacob Quackenbush, his 3 brothers, and Mr. Templeton partners. 1 genuine, very beautiful, perfect round, pink-colored pearl, 3/8 of an inch in diameter. 1 pearl as large as a pistol ball, perfectly round, light rose color, the largest yet found that is indisposed of. 2 perfectly round white pearls about the size of a rifle ball. 3 oblong pearls, rose and pink colored, and the size of peas. 14 pearls about the size of buckshots of various colors and forms, some of them being imperfect. 6 of the same size but of good color and perfectly round, beside a large number of very small pearls and other various sizes with but peculiar or imperfect colors. This entire lot is estimated by the possessors as worth $3,000. They were all obtained on Monday and Tuesday of last week by the 4 parties who own them. Another lot in the hands of Jacob Quackenbush consists as follows: 2 beautiful and perfectly round pearls, pink color and the size of large pea. 2 the same description as large as a common pea. 2 the same description the size of a small pea. 10 of the same description in the size of a number 3 shot. 14 of irregular form, different colors, and the size of peas. 1 as large as a pistol ball of oblong form and pink color. This lot is estimated to be worth $250. Now, many of these pearls were sold to the New York City market, and others were kept locally as souvenirs. Patterson's first mayor, John J. Brown, is supposed to have owned several Patterson pearls, and another resident, General Thomas D. Huxley, wore one as a tie pin in many social occasions throughout his life. It is estimated that pearl sales in 1857 from the rush valued $15,000, which is approximately $542,000 today. By July, only small seed pearls the size of peas were being found. The New York Times provided descriptions and details of over 58 pearls, indicating that smaller ones also existed that they didn't mention in detail. Within a year, that amount dropped substantially, showing that the river was being overfished. Within a few years, there were no mussels left in the Notch Brook at all. The Patterson pearls inspired similar rushes in other freshwater streams around the country, including Pennsylvania, Ohio, Texas, and Colorado. But the next big American pearl rush was not until 20 years later in Ohio. The museum is very lucky to have not 1, but 5 Patterson pearls in our collection today, and they were recently placed on permanent display in the main gallery. This is in no small part due to the effort and support of the Patterson Museum Foundation, our nonprofit partner, who purchased the display case for these precious artifacts. We owe this collection in great part to this man, George Frederick Kunz, and you've heard me mention him and quote him throughout this presentation. Kunz served as vice president of Tiffany and Company from 1879 until his death. During that time, he was a major authority on pearls. His books on pearls and gems are still used today, and we actually have links to several of them on our website. He was collecting pearls between 1900 and 1908 as he conducted research for this publication, The Book of the Pearl, which he published in 1908. We believe that Kunz purchased the five museum pearls during that time. And since he worked for Tiffany's, we believe he purchased them from among those Patterson pearls sold to Tiffany during the rush. Kunz then sold them to J.P. Morgan, the famous American banker. Kunz had worked with Morgan several times, including compiling a collection for the financier to display in the 1889 Exposition Universelle in Paris. Morgan, who was a big contributor to many New York museums, donated the Patterson pearls to the American Museum of Natural History in New York. In the 1970s, the American Museum of Natural History exchanged the pearls, and they were in the collection of Paula International, a gemstone broker based in California. Through a series of exchanges, they came to the Patterson Museum in 2004. And now, 20 years later, they are finally on display at the museum. Our five pearls are described as 4 large and 1 small. They vary in weight, the smallest being 3.72 carats, while the largest is 12.05 carats. And they also vary in size, all having irregular surfaces consistent with naturally occurring freshwater pearls. And so that's the story of Paterson's Pearl Mania, a quirky piece of Paterson's history that continues to inspire. Before I open up for questions, I would like to read this poem, which was printed in the Morning Call on September 26, 1931. A New Jersey York. Dan Howells liked his muscles fried in deep and sizzling fat. He tucked his pants into his boots and fished the stream, tat tat. The same in which Jake Quackenbush a year ago or more had found the pearl that made him rich and French Eugenie wore. Oh, never such a muscle mess as Howells gathered then from Notchbrook near to Paterson was shelled of mortal men. He cooked the beauties to a turn in depths of chosen grease, sat down with Epicurean joy to sample them at ease. But plans the best are ever frail. He almost broke his jaw upon the first sweet morsel knifed into his eager maw. Remembering J. Quackenbush, whose treasure he had seen, he scavenged in his mouth and found a similar pearly bean. So happy was Dan Howells that he kicked his shoe-make last, although it was not really there, into an outworn past. All in his Sunday best, he crossed to Tiffany's next day to turn his bauble into gold, spending it all the way. It had been a priceless pearl, the jeweler agreed, but now quite spoiled by too much fat, not worth a cent indeed. Regretting if professionally, he sighed and shook his head. Dan Howells didn't seem to him a lucky man, he said. And that poem was submitted to the paper by F.M. Morris Eddy. And while some of the facts of that poem are a little bit out of order and the chronology is not quite right, I just thought that that was a fun way to end today's presentation, and also to sort of demonstrate that this sort of story of the Pearl Rush has continued to sort of fascinate people long after it was over. And so now I'd be very happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
Think you're taking them by surprise, or you answered all the questions. I'm waiting. That was wonderful, Heather. It's something I wanted to research ever since I heard about them. The only sad thing is to find out that they're truly not within our boundaries.
Well, I mean, most of the people that were involved were Pattersonians. Now, interestingly, I did some research in the city directories, and Dan Howell, who is mentioned in several newspapers, that's his name, that's where he lived. He is not in any city directories. I couldn't find him either listed via his business as a shoemaker or at his house address. But the Quackenbushes I did find. I found Jacob Quackenbush.
Okay, here's a couple of questions, and they're starting to come into the question and answer. Got it. Okay. Any records of Patterson area Indians who collected pearls?
I I don't know those sources incredibly well, but not that I know of. I don't think so.
Let's see, Elaine has asked a question. The Quackenbush department store, family member?
I believe so, but I'm not sure. The Quackenbushes are a very large family, with a couple of big branches. So I'm not sure directly how Jacob Quackenbush of this story fits in directly with the department store, but there's definitely a connection there.
Joseph had a follow-up question. Any other gemstones mined in Patterson or immediate surroundings?
Well, Patterson is actually one of New Jersey's two most important minerally significant locations because the over 45 different minerals form here in the basalt that makes up sort of the area around the Great Falls, as well as Garrett Mountain. But very few of those are particularly valuable. I guess quartz would probably be the most recognizable. A couple of different types of quartz that we found
Amethyst.
here. Amethyst being a big one, smoky quartz as well. But even that, I don't think in terms of value that's very high up on the list. Jack, you know a little bit more about that than I do.
Yeah, actually, prehnite can also be faceted. It's our number one green mineral. It's probably the most prevalent found. It's quite soft, but it's also often cloudy. The Pune region of India, which has a similar, mineralized basalt area, their clarity is a little bit better than ours in certain minerals. But the probably the amethyst would be the number one for what do you call it, jewelry.
But finding amethyst, there was never any great rush or attempt to
Oh.
dig up specifically for amethyst. It was always just a byproduct of blowing up the basalt.
Correct. Most of probably Patterson's finest minerals were destroyed as they were mining the basalt for road beds and building materials, a good aggregate. Elaine said as a child, her and her father collected quartz. Pink, purple, green. Let's see. Everybody, of course, is you're getting a lot of nice thank you and wonderful presentation, I should say. Diane, many specimens of Museum Natural History mineral collection from New Jersey. Yeah, actually, if you go to the Museum of Natural History or any worldwide collection that has a systematic collection, you will find a separate cabinet normally on Patterson minerals. They're that well known internationally. I got another question. Dennis, in the early 1960s, I used to search the Pearl Brook in Clifton, which bordered our yard. No luck with pearls, though. Sad face. Can any mollusks rather, still be found in Patterson area brooks or rivers?
And I don't know. Probably. Um, I'm not that familiar with the current ecology. I know that a lot of things have come back, particularly in the Passaic. So I would assume there are some somewhere.
You look along the river, a lot of those little clam shells. Just
Yeah.
it's pretty littered with that. Terry wrote, we grew up in the area where Notch Brook was located. The local brook between Valley Road and Broad Street was known as Pearl Brook. And old folks would tell us that a pearl was once found there.
So the interesting thing I think in all of the accounts of the Patterson pearls is they kept talking about them being pink and rosy. But in all my research about pearls, that's incredibly rare for freshwater pearls or even saltwater pearls to find a pink one. So I think maybe someone with a little more knowledge about pearls than I have should go a little deeper into that because I think probably they were embellishing a little bit or their decision their color palette was a little off when they described them. But the same they describe a lot of them as being perfectly round, and we know that that is unlikely as well. So, you know.
One comment that came earlier that I just want to say for someone who's proud from Patterson, Elaine wrote, I wear my t-shirt backwards so you can see a photo of the falls. A woman said, do you know your t-shirt is backwards? And she said she knew. Anyone else have any questions or comments? This wonderful presentation.
Thanks. I wish I could go into more detail, but there's not really all that much more to say. You know, I'm trying to find the key players involved. It was pretty hard to find any more details, and the later newspapers were very, as with the poem, very inaccurate. The stuff that was getting reported in the 30s, like thinking back and remembering, was getting the facts all mixed up. And
I think that's about it, Heather.
great.
So pretty soon, if anybody missed any part of this, or you can tell your friends of what a wonderful presentation you've been, telling us right now, share it and they can find it on our YouTube site.
Yep, we should have it up. I would say today's Wednesday, definitely by Friday, maybe tomorrow. And anybody who signed up for this will get a notification that with sharing the link for the video so that you can watch it again or share it with other people.
Once again, I'd like to thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving.